So our frequency and building up too fast can cause injuries. We know that. But what about the structure of the knee itself? Like, why is it such a weak point? Is it just bad design?
It's an interesting one because when we're talking about patellofemoral pain or runner's knee, we're not talking about the knee joint itself. There's two joints within the actual knee, and there's the femur connecting to your shin bone, which doesn't really get subjected to that much. But then we have the connection of the kneecap onto the femur. Mm-hmm. So that's the second joint. And that second joint is what we refer to when it comes to patellofemoral pain or runner's knee. And that kneecap is it's essentially floating in space and sort of held there with muscle and tendon. And it's designed to create this sort of hinge motion. And it's just susceptible to high loads when we run. When we impact the ground, mm-hmm. the ground reaction forces to that particular structure, it's essentially the kneecap can compress onto the femur. And if that's fine, that's what it's designed to do. It has cartilage on there, so that's smooth and everything is meant to work well. But if you treat it with an abrupt change, that's when it starts to become sore. And so to answer your question, it's just the orientation of the muscle itself, the orientation of the bones and the ligaments, and it just makes it particularly susceptible to our training.
Right. So what can we do to strengthen everything? First of all, let's talk about prevention. So I'm assuming you're going to talk about strength training, but is it something to do with our running form? It seems like there are some people who are just naturally more susceptible to this.
There are some people that may be naturally susceptible. We do know that once someone has had an injury, they're more likely to get that injury again in the future. Mm-hmm. So if someone had shin splints 6 months ago, if they were to get another running related injury tomorrow, the odds of it being shin splints is higher than all other sort of injuries just because they've had that history and maybe their rehab isn't as great. Maybe it is something to do with their running form. Maybe it is something to do with a particular weakness. If someone is continuously getting patellofemoral pain, it may be because they've had patellofemoral pain in the past, but mm-hmm. there are some traits that may lead someone particularly susceptible to this injury. First of all, one is analyzing their training. Are they a hill runner? Are they running too fast? Is their training intensity distribution too whack, to out of balance? Mm-hmm. Is there, I guess, the mentality that they have in terms of do they increase their mileage too much per week when on race day? And if they're susceptible to having knee pain in the past and they do an overload, they're more likely to get knee pain arise in the future. But looking at the specifics of running, definitely a low cadence. So the amount of steps that you take per minute. Mm-hmm. We know through research that someone who has a lower cadence, or if someone is running below their ideal cadence, that increases loads on the knee joint. It increases the loads on other joints as well, but the knee seems to be particularly affected by that. And sometimes people with low cadence also concurrently have an overstride pattern. So when they very first make contact with the ground, that is a little bit too in far front of their body and creating a little bit more of a braking force, which goes straight through the knee. And so if someone has a chat with me and says, I've had a history of patellofemoral pain and I want to make sure that I do everything possible to reduce the likelihood of it turning up, I would, yes, talk about their training. What's their philosophy when they're preparing for a race? What sort of mileage do they increase? What's their speed? What are their hills like? But then I'll also ask about cadence. Say, what cadence do you run at? And then we can, if we identify something that might be a potential cause, then we talk about changing that.